It was a Tuesday, just like any other Tuesday. I remember the stale coffee smell clinging to the air in the office, the incessant tapping of keyboards, and the low hum of the server room down the hall. My boss, Mark Thompson, called me into his office, his voice unusually jovial. He greeted me with, "Come in here, Matthew. My name is Melissa," and that was the first sign that everything was about to fall apart. I should have known something was coming, but I was too busy trying to keep my head above water. What happened next would change my life forever. Hi everyone, my name is Melissa, and the story I'm about to share is something I still struggle to believe actually happened. It's a story of betrayal, deceit, and ultimately a kind of twisted justice. Before I dive in, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let me know.
I'd been working at Global Tech Solutions for almost 10 years, working my way up to head of cybersecurity. It was a demanding job requiring long hours and constant vigilance, but I was good at it. I thrived on the challenge of staying one step ahead of the hackers, of protecting the company's data and assets. My life outside of work, though, was a different story. My marriage to David had been slowly unraveling for months. There were little things at first. David working later, unexplained charges on our credit card, and a general sense of distance between us. I chalked it up to stress. We'd been together since college, and I told myself that every relationship has its ups and downs. But then the little things started to become bigger, more noticeable. David started going to late-night meetings at least twice a week.
He'd come home smelling faintly of a new cologne, one that I hadn't bought him. Our conversations became strained, filled with awkward silences and a distinct lack of affection. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would brush me off, saying I was being paranoid and that he was just stressed with work. I wanted to believe him, but a nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't let me. One evening, I was getting ready for bed when I noticed a new bottle of perfume on David's side of the dresser. It was a scent I didn't recognize. Something floral and expensive. I picked it up, examining the label, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he was seeing someone else. I decided I needed proof. I couldn't confront him with just a feeling. I needed concrete evidence. So I did something I never thought I was capable of doing. I installed a GPS tracker on his car. I know it sounds extreme, but I felt like I was losing my mind. I needed to know the truth. The next morning, I checked the tracker. David had driven to an address I didn't recognize, a swanky apartment complex on the other side of town. He stayed there for several hours before driving to work. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the image of that apartment complex in my head. I knew I had to find out who lived there. The next day, I used my cybersecurity skills to hack into David's phone. It wasn't difficult given my access and experience. What I found nearly broke me. There were dozens of text messages and calls between David and a woman named Emily. The messages were explicit, filled with promises and declarations of love. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The pain was physical, a sharp ache in my chest.
But the worst was yet to come. Buried deep within the messaging app was a folder labeled Photos. I hesitated for a moment, my hand trembling before opening it. Inside were pictures of David and Emily, together. They were smiling, laughing, and touching each other in ways that were once reserved for me. One picture, in particular, caught my eye. It was a picture of David holding a baby I didn't recognize. My heart skipped a beat. I scrolled through the other photos and there it was, again. The baby, growing older in each picture. The caption read, "Lily's first birthday. Lily was Emily's daughter, but Lily also had David's eyes." Suddenly, a memory surfaced. A conversation I'd had with my doctor years ago. We'd been struggling to conceive and, after several tests, he told me that David had a low sperm count, making it unlikely for us to have children naturally.
We decided to pursue other options, but eventually gave up, accepting that we might never be parents. And then my daughter, Chloe, came along. We adopted her when she was 6 months old, and she instantly became the center of our world. She was the best thing that had ever happened to us. But now, looking at the picture of David and Lily, a horrifying thought crept into my mind. Could Chloe not be David's? I spiraled. I remembered when Chloe was born. David had been strangely insistent that we adopt her, almost pushing me to say yes. I had been so happy, so caught up in the joy of becoming a mother, that I hadn't questioned it. But now it all made sense. He knew he could never have children of his own, but he didn't want me to know. He wanted to keep his secret hidden. I confronted him that night, showing him the pictures, demanding the truth.
He denied it at first, but when I showed him the GPS data and the text messages, he broke down. He confessed everything. The affair with Emily, the baby, and the fact that Chloe wasn't biologically related to him. He begged me for forgiveness, saying he still loved me and that he didn't want to lose me. But the damage was done. The trust was shattered. I told him to leave, that I couldn't bear to look at him. He packed his bags and walked out, leaving me alone in the house we had built together. I sat there for hours, numb with shock and grief. My world had been turned upside down in a matter of days. The next few weeks were a blur. I went through the motions of daily life, but I felt like I was living in a dream. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. I leaned on my friends for support, confiding in them about everything that had happened.
They were there for me, listening without judgment and offering words of comfort. But even their support couldn't fill the void in my heart. And as if things weren't bad enough, my professional life was about to take a nosedive too. Around the same time, I started noticing subtle changes at work. Mark Thompson, the CEO, had always been friendly and supportive, but lately he had been distant and cold. He would avoid eye contact and cut our conversations short. I chalked it up to stress. Global Tech was a large company, and there were always pressures from shareholders and competitors. But then I started hearing rumors. Whispers in the hallways about layoffs and restructuring. My name was mentioned more than once, always in hushed tones. I dismissed it as office gossip, but a seed of doubt had been planted.
I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing, something that could jeopardize my job. I decided to use my access to monitor internal company emails, something that was technically against company policy, but I felt like I had no choice. I needed to know what was going on. It didn't take long for me to find what I was looking for. Buried within a series of encrypted emails was a plan to restructure the cybersecurity department. The plan involved eliminating my position and replacing me with someone younger, someone more cost-effective. The emails also revealed that Mark Thompson's son-in-law, Kevin, was slated to take over my responsibilities. Kevin was a recent college graduate with no real-world experience. The only reason he was even considered for the position was because of his connection to the CEO. I was furious.
I had dedicated 10 years of my life to Global Tech, working tirelessly to protect the company from cyber threats. And now I was being thrown aside for a nepotistic hire. But the emails also revealed something even more disturbing. Mark Thompson and David had been in contact for months. They had been meeting in secret, discussing my performance and plotting my downfall. I couldn't believe it. My husband, the man I had trusted and loved, had been working with my boss to get rid of me. The betrayal was almost too much to bear. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of deceit. I had lost my husband, I might lose my job, and I was starting to lose faith in humanity. That's when I walked into my boss's office on that fateful Tuesday morning. He called me in under the pretense of a routine performance review. But I knew what was coming. As I sat down, I noticed the forced smile on his face, the way he avoided eye contact. He started with the usual platitudes, praising my hard work and dedication. But then he dropped the bomb. "Melissa," he said, "we've decided to restructure the cybersecurity department. Unfortunately, your position is being eliminated." He went on to explain that it was a difficult decision, but that it was necessary for the company's future. He offered me a severance package and thanked me for my service. I listened in silence, my mind racing. I knew this was coming, but it still stung. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. I had been betrayed by my husband, my boss, and the company I had dedicated my life to. But, as I sat there, I realized that I wasn't powerless. I had a secret weapon, something that Mark Thompson and David didn't know about.
Before they could terminate me and install Kevin, they had no idea what I had done. As head of cybersecurity, I had access to every system in the company. I had implemented numerous security protocols, firewalls, and backup systems. But I had also implemented something else, something that was hidden deep within the company's network, a dead man's switch. A fail-safe that would be triggered if I was ever terminated or my access was revoked. I had designed it to protect the company from insider threats, but now I was going to use it for my own revenge. The dead man's switch was tied to my employee badge. If my badge was deactivated, the system would initiate a series of automated processes. First, it would reroute all network traffic through a false node, a virtual server that I had created. This would allow me to monitor all incoming and outgoing data.
Then, after 10 minutes, the system would begin to systematically corrupt the company's databases, one by one. The corruption would be subtle at first, barely noticeable, but over time, it would escalate, eventually leading to a complete system collapse. The best part was that it would appear to be human error, specifically the error of the person who had taken over my responsibilities. Kevin, Mark Thompson's son-in-law. The system logs would point to him, making him the scapegoat for the entire disaster. Mark Thompson would be furious, and Kevin's career would be over before it even started. As Mark Thompson finished explaining my termination, he extended his hand for a handshake. I stood up, looked him in the eye, and said, "Thank you for the opportunity." I shook his hand, a cold smile playing on my lips. Then I turned and walked out of his office, my head held high. I packed my belongings, said goodbye to my few remaining friends, and walked out of the building for the last time. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, I took a deep breath of fresh air. It felt good to be free. I knew what was about to happen. In 10 minutes, the dead man's switch would be activated, and Global Tech Solutions would begin its descent into chaos. I didn't feel guilty. I felt justified. I had been wronged, and I was simply evening the score. I walked to my car, got in, and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the building one last time. The lights were still on, the hum of the server still audible, but soon everything would change. I drove to a nearby coffee shop and ordered a latte. As I sat there, sipping my coffee, I pulled out my laptop and connected to the internet.
I logged into the false node I had created and began monitoring Global Tech's network traffic. I watched as the data flowed through the system, unaware of the impending doom. At exactly 10 minutes past my termination, the dead man's switch was activated. The system began to reroute traffic, and the corruption of the databases began. Within minutes, the first signs of trouble began to appear. Error messages popped up on employees' computers, network connections slowed to a crawl, and the company's website went offline. Panic spread through the office as people realized that something was seriously wrong. I watched it all unfold on my laptop screen, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. Mark Thompson would be furious. He would be scrambling to find a solution, to fix the damage before it was too late. But it was already too late.
The system was designed to fail, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I stayed at the coffee shop for several hours, watching the chaos unfold. The news of Global Tech system failure spread like wildfire. It was the lead story on every news channel, and social media was buzzing with speculation. The company's stock price plummeted, and shareholders were demanding answers. Mark Thompson was in damage control mode, issuing statements and holding press conferences. He blamed the system failure on a technical glitch and assured everyone that the company was working to restore its systems. But I knew the truth. I knew that it wasn't a glitch. It was a deliberate act of sabotage, an act of revenge. As the day wore on, I decided it was time to leave. I closed my laptop, finished my latte, and walked out of the coffee shop. I had done what I set out to do. I had avenged myself, and I had exposed the corruption and betrayal that had been festering within Global Tech Solutions. A few weeks later, I received a call from a former colleague. She told me that Mark Thompson had been fired and that Kevin had been quietly dismissed. The company was in chaos, struggling to recover from the system failure. The damage was extensive, costing the company millions of dollars and irreparably damaging its reputation. As for David, I filed for divorce and moved on with my life. It was difficult, but I was determined to rebuild myself and create a better future. I focused on my career, taking on new challenges and expanding my skills. I also focused on my daughter, Chloe. She was my rock, the one constant in my life. I showered her with love and affection, making sure she knew how much she meant to me.
One evening, as I tucked Chloe into bed, she looked at me with her big, innocent eyes and said, "Mummy, are you happy now?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "I'm happy now. I realized that I didn't need revenge to find happiness. All I needed was my daughter, my friends, and my own sense of self-worth. I had learned a valuable lesson, that betrayal can be painful, but it can also be a catalyst for change. It can force you to reevaluate your life, to let go of the past, and to embrace the future. I never told anyone about the dead man's switch. It remained my secret, a silent reminder of the day I took control of my life and walked away from the people who had wronged me. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about Mark Thompson and David, wondering what they were doing and how they were coping with the consequences of their actions.
I didn't feel sorry for them. They had made their choices, and they had to live with the consequences. I learned later that Emily had left David after the scandal, taking Lily with her. David was left alone, his reputation ruined, and his life in shambles. Mark Thompson, once a powerful and respected CEO, was now a pariah, shunned by his former colleagues and friends. Their lives had been destroyed, not by me, but by their own greed and deceit. And as for me, I was finally free. Free from the betrayal, free from the lies, and free to create a new life for myself and my daughter. I eventually found love again, with someone who valued and respected me for who I was. We built a life together, filled with love, laughter, and trust. My 7-year-old daughter took the wrong iPad to school. What the teacher found led to my boss and husband's downfall. Then, some people try to bury secrets, others find a way to let them surface. And that's when I realized that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and never looking back. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel for more such stories.